In this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast, I'm chatting with Andrew Middleton, Army Aviator. Now, Andrew grew up in Townsville, became an ANSET first officer by the age of 18. ANSET went bust, so he wanted to keep flying. So ended up joining the Army and having a great career across many airframes doing the Army. We talk about Andrew gets really personal and shares some really interesting challenges that he went through, particularly upon transition, particularly relating to his mental health, which I know that a lot of military people will resonate with. But ultimately, he's an author now, and he's got this brilliant leadership framework called C3P3, and he runs Middleton Consulting Group. So a really powerful episode, a really raw episode, and one that I had the privilege of participating in. So stick around. Andrew Middleton, stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast. My name's Pete Liston, and today I'm chatting with Andrew Middleton. G'day, Andrew. How you going?
Good, Pete. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm very well. Now, we cross paths at Headquarters Forces Command in the best Army posting in the world, which is our Victoria Barracks in Sydney, right near Bondi and Coogee Beach.
Right.
What job were you doing there at the time?
I was the military advisor to the Director General Training at the time.
Yeah, and I was just some random, humble run around, S03. But you had a really interesting career, first of all, as a pilot. I'd love to unpack, your military career and then how you moved and how you transitioned out, how you wrote the book, C3P3 Leadership, and started Middleton Consulting. But I always like to just go back to the roots, back to basics. Whereabouts did you grow up and why did you join the military?
Yeah, good question, Pete. So I grew up in Townsville, a pretty military town, as you'd appreciate. I was the son of a lawyer, but my father was also a reservist legal officer out at Laverick Barracks. So I grew up going to Laverick Barracks on a Friday night as a young kid, filling my face full of Mars bars and Coke, doing the obstacle course and watching Rambo First Blood Part 3, all that sort of stuff, which you probably can't do any of that today as a kid on a military base. Yeah, as I grew up, I was exposed to Hornets constantly punching over the top and breaking the sound barrier, and that's sort of where my love for aviation started and my desire to fly. And I started pilot training when I was 14 years old.
14. So I'm actually reading my 7-year-old a book called The Alchemist, which I absolutely love, and it's all about your life mission. And all he wants to do is be a pilot. So we're talking about, when's the earliest we can get you pilot training and that kind of stuff. So mate, you've lived this.
Yeah. 14 was pretty young to start. I look back now and think how they let me take a plane solo at that age. I don't know, but so I initially wanted to go into the airlines, and I followed that pathway and did my 737 conversion with Ansett Airlines.
Yep.
And so at the young age of 18, I was pretty much a first officer, but as you remember, Ansett started to collapse and eventually folded. And so that ended my airline career pretty quickly. And unfortunately, I couldn't transition to Qantas because all the senior guys were doing that.
Yeah.
So I was left to find another way of flying. And that's when I sort of went back towards the military. And interestingly, I went into recruiting and spoke to the Air Force, and they said, "Oh, look, you might be a qualified pilot, but you didn't get straight A's at school, so
Stop it! Come on, really?
So we don't want you." And as I was walking out of recruiting, quite deflated, this Army guy ran up and said, "Hey, do you want to fly for the Army? We've got helicopters." And I said, "Look, yeah, why not?" And then they said, "Do you know the difference between GSO and SSO?" And I said, "No." So that then enabled them to shape me to go down the GSO pathway, which I was incredibly grateful that I did. So off I went to Royal Military College in Duntroon. Did the full year and a half there, and ended up going to infantry for a year.
All right.
Because there was a backlog of pilots at the time. So, but that was great. So I got to put into practice what we all did at RMC. Served as I did the infantry ROBC and served as a platoon commander for a year before going on to pilot's course.
Which
And
battalion did you get to?
887 RVR of all things, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. It was an integrated ARA reserve battalion.
Yep.
Loved it. Loved it.
Mate, when you kicked off at 14, do you start off with gliders or do you go straight to powered?
I went straight to powered through Cessna 152.
Yeah, right. And then when you just sort of glossed over something there. 18, you're already a first officer, which means, I guess, you're flying the plane or second in charge of the plane. But 18 to already have one career ripped away from you, mate. At 18, I'd barely even, looking after myself, let alone looking after a couple hundred people on a plane. And it's really fascinating to me that RAF said no.
Yeah. So what's interesting though is when I went to Tamworth to do the initial pilot training, which is tri-service, so Army, Air Force, and Navy, I was the first one of my class to do my final handling test, and I was 2 weeks ahead of everyone else. And I drew the chief military instructor, who was known for scrubbing, getting rid of pilots, and I'd never flown with him before, so I still remember getting up that morning. The weather was terrible. I was having breakfast and I vomited across the table because I was so nervous. But long story short, I did the flight, and afterwards he just said, "I'll see you in the CO's office for a debrief." And I thought, "Oh my God, I'm gone. I'm out." And I went into the CO's office, and there was 3 people in there: the CO, the chief military instructor, and another Air Force pilot. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And they turned around and said, "Mate, you got fast jet potential. We want you in the blue. We want you in a blue uniform. We can have you transferred to the Air Force for graduation. What do you reckon?" And I said, "You can stick it."
Hey, sticking with the green.
Yeah. Army gave me a shot, and I'm now an officer in the Army, and there's loyalty there, and I'm glad I stayed true and didn't change uniform. But it was just ironic to be told in recruiting you're not good enough, and then to have Air Force say we want you.
Yeah, and that's a pretty tasty carrot to say, to knock back fast air. One of the I do have a very, very minor and very humble flying worry is during RMC I did get selected to do that flight screening course, the 10 days up in Tamworth, and I'd literally never been in the front of a plane before, never ever flown a plane, but what an amazing experience that from being there to within 10 flights being able to say, yes, I've done a loop-the-loop and aileron roll, but my problem was landing. Right, taking off is fine. You just power up and the thing just goes in the sky. But I do remember once coming into the big wide runway at Tamworth. I think is it called a Cap 10, the one with the wheel at the back? And then as I landed, I didn't quite have it straight enough, and the thing pitched to the left, and I found myself like aiming to the side of the runway, not down the runway. So I just quickly powered up and went back up into the sky again. And it was actually doing that for some reason that I passed the course. He goes, "Well, at least you knew what to do when something went wrong." And he went back. I just thought I was safer going back up in the sky than staying on the ground for that moment. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did get accepted into Army Aviation, but due to a former romance, I promised someone that I'd only do 4 years in the Army, and Army Aviation was only another 7 or something. So I went and joined Ramey. But mate, less of me, more of you. What was it like getting your first, sorry, go back. You go do you graduate, you go to infantry, then your turn comes to go back to Tamworth and do flight school. And then basically you learn how to be a fixed wing pilot, but you're already a fixed wing pilot. So was it just easy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, elements of it were easy. I understood, air law, meteorology, the concept of flying, aerodynamics, that sort of stuff. But the military aspect of, like you alluded to, doing aerobatics,
Yeah.
And time on target, low level navs to plus or minus 15 seconds. That is all another level, or
Yeah.
a quite different to what you would do as a commercial pilot. So there
Mm.
were some challenges there.
So you do your fixed wing at Tamworth. You then get your wings as such, and now you're a pilot. But then you head up to Oakey, is it, to do your helicopter training?
Yeah, yeah. So you go to Oakey and you do. Sorry, wind back. That's how we do it now. But how we
Yep.
did it when I went through was you go to Canberra.
Ah,
So the ADF helicopter school used to be at Fairburn, and you
okay.
would do your helicopter conversion. Back then, it was on the AS350 Squirrel
Yep.
helicopter. So that was a 6-month course there, basic helicopter flying. And then you would go to Oakey and you would go onto your operational type, whether that was Iroquois, Black Hawk, Kiowa, now Tiger, MRH, soon to be Black Hawk and
Yeah.
Apache.
So how do you get allocated or choose which airframe you're going to spend your career on?
Yeah, so you get a choice. So they always take your choice into preference, but it also depends on where the need is. So
Mm.
you would have heard it yourself, the operational need. Do they need Black Hawk pilots over, Kiowa pilots? But there was also a performance aspect as well. So, how did you perform on course, to which aircraft type you would go to as well. So there's a whole lot of things that came into the decision making process.
So would it have been Black Hawk and Chinook being the two like most sought after at that time?
So at that time, it was everyone sort of. There's no one that was particularly sought after. Chinook was a second tour aircraft,
Yep.
so it was really between Kiowa, Iroquois, and Black Hawk. I put my hand up for Iroquois,
Yep.
and my reason for that was because I knew its service wasn't going to be around forever. So I thought,
Mm.
why not fly such a historic, well-known helicopter, which is a real hands and feet power horse as well, knowing that at some time later in my career I'd transition onto other types.
That what a clever way to look at it.
Mm,
Now when we have an Iroquois that comes in over Terrigal Beach every Anzac Day, flies up and does, big
mm.
flares, little, skips around. I just love that thumping sound of it. Now you mentioned hands and feet, like, and I'm not a pilot, but I sort of imagine, is it a little bit like driving an old Holden Kingswood versus a modern BMW in terms of really working that thing, manually, mechanically?
Yeah, yeah. So the Huey, it had no autopilot. It was all hands and feet. So, and you were power limited, although it had quite a lot of power. You did have to be wind aware and aware of your weight at all times and how you flew it. Um, so yeah, and it was like an old Holden, right?
Yeah.
It was a simple aircraft that had less things that could go wrong, and you could take it outfield, get it dusty, um, you know, and it would always start, and you'd always be able to get up there and do your mission. So yeah.
So what did you get onto after Iroquois?
So after Iroquois, I'm just trying to think back. I did an exchange with 847 Naval Air Squadron in
Yep.
the UK and flew Gazelle and Lynx
Yep.
with them. I then came back and I was back on Huey's for a bit more before going into some non-core postings and then on to Kiowa. So they started up a new squadron. So this is when Fixed Wing went back to Air Force, and we had a backload of pilots, and they needed a squadron to keep these pilots flying before their operational types. So they stood up 173 Squadron as part of 6 Aviation Regiment in Sydney, and at that stage I was the officer commanding. Did my Kiowa conversion and commanded that squadron. Later on, after a bunch of other non-core postings, I ended up returning to Oakey as the commanding officer, so the chief instructor, chief pilot, which was interesting because normally you would do your instructor rating as a captain, and you would stream down that instructor pathway. I did my instructor rating as a lieutenant colonel, which had never been done before, and part of that was because of the desire to have general service officers in command positions rather than special service officers. So I went and did that, instructed on Kiowa. I did a quick Black Hawk conversion because they were under my command, and I also did a ARH conversion as well. So got to do a bit of everything.
Does that sound like just a cheeky gimme that I'm the boss and I want to fly these things, so I'm just going to do the course?
Well, look, there was part of that, but then there's also the part that if you're the CO and you're the authorizing officer, you need to obviously need to know the aircraft to be able to authorize it. So
sounds like a great excuse to play with some different toys. Just across those different airframes, again, like I have no experience in this, but are they like driving a Holden, BMW, Porsche, just in terms of performance and how you throw them around the sky?
Yeah. So when I flew the Black Hawk, what really impressed me there was just how much power it had and how you could just fly it differently to a Huey or a Kiowa.
Yeah.
But what really impressed me with the ARH is it was like a Ferrari. That thing could really, really fly, and it was really nice to fly as well.
I remember the first time I saw a Black Hawk outside of RMC I was in Timor, and there was a medical incident. We were at I can't remember what it was called, but you had the main camp Phoenix, and then you had the airstrip just up where they had all of the New Zealand Iroquois were still flying there. And on that time, I think that was TLBG4, about 2000 and maybe 7 or 8, 9, something like that. But this Black Hawk came in and landed right near the hospital, and when it took off, it just went straight up into the sky. And I was just gobsmacked. It didn't have to sort of nose pitch forward and then sort of like take off like along a runway. This thing just went straight up, and it was just amazing to watch, man, just the sheer power out of it. But so not a bad career, mate. Just you get paid for doing this.
Yeah, look, don't get me wrong, I miss it. I loved it. And I was very fortunate to do some overseas postings. I served in 1 aviation regiment in Darwin, 5 aviation regiment in Townsville, 6 aviation regiment in Sydney. So I got to serve in all 3, as well as the brigade headquarters. And what my wife hates when we go away is I've pretty much covered every square piece of Australia in terms of my flying career. So she'll be like, "Oh, let's go look at the 12 Apostles," and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I flew between them at dusk one evening,
Did a low level pass one day,
It was yeah. Or I'd love to go and see Ayers Rock, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I remember flying over there," and yeah.
And one thing I was chatting to, I think one of the key differences between military flying and civilian flying is you allowed to do this low level extreme stuff that other pilots just, I don't know whether it's even allowed with civil aviation, but you guys train on this and do it elite.
Yeah. I mean, there are allowances for us. You still can't just go and blasé do it. I mean, there's that perception, or you have to fly aware and airmanship in terms of who's around. But look, I can recall stories of us racing around Bathurst at low level, a trail of 6 Hueys, and doing 200-foot flights up and down the beach at St Kilda or past Sydney. So yeah, we do get to have a bit of fun.
Before we get to your transition, and do you still fly?
No. So I do miss it, but I don't fly anymore.
Okay, just happy to let it go. Don't have the inkling, or do you still have a license? Could you take the missus for a joyride down at the local airport or something like that?
Oh, look, it would be very hard for me to get my license back now because I did go out medically. And so to go down that CASA pathway would probably be a bit of a hurdle. So I haven't pursued that at the moment.
So what years did you do in the military? How long did you serve for?
So 1997 was when I joined, and I got out in 2022. So it's just shy of 25 years.
With your airframes, was there much opportunity to deploy in a flying role?
Yeah, we had Timor was an opportunity even before Timor, Bougainville. So one of the good things about being a Huey pilot was you could pack up a Huey really quickly, put it in the back of a C-17 and deploy rapidly. So there was Bougainville, Banda Aceh was
Yep.
the tsunami was a deployment, Solomon Islands, and then of course, as you'd remember, we had all that time in Afghanistan as well, which was predominantly Chinooks just rotating through.
Did you go to Banda Aceh?
Yes, yes.
I've got a mate. One of my classmates was a combat engineer in Banda Aceh, and just a truly like for his particular role, which was very much, I don't know how to use a terrible term, cleanup role.
Mm.
Just the sheer tragedy and loss of life over there was just extreme at that time. What was your role in Banda Aceh?
Yeah, so I remember sitting, I just got down to my mother's house on the Gold Coast for Christmas, and I remember seeing the news and thinking, "Phew, I'm going to get a call." And
Yeah.
literally within about 30 minutes, I got a call. And I went over there as an Iroquois troop commander, so it was a flying role. And I remember getting into country and then just seeing the devastation, like seeing a container ship a kilometre inland. So what you see on TV was one thing, but then when you're actually there and you just see it, um, it was truly, truly like breathtaking what you actually saw. I still remember doing a particular flight. We had, I think, over 12 people in the aircraft. So that's more than what
Maxed
the
out.
that's more than what the aircraft
Yeah.
has in terms of seats. And I remember flying over this. It was just all mud, and this woman was crying. And I asked the crew chief to put her on headset just so I could have a chat to her and find out, if there's anything I could do. And she actually spoke English well, and she said that this whole area was her town, and
Mm.
she'd lost her husband, her parents, and all of her children. She was the only survivor of her family, and here we were flying over what was once a town, which is now all mud. And so I just remember that was quite an impactful moment. In fact, the whole crew was tearing up over it, and yeah, it was quite devastating.
This is the burdens and the privilege of the military experience that you don't just get to see it on TV. You don't just get to see these waves coming in and the devastation, but you actually get to live that experience and relate to these people physically in their space. It's just, I think Banda Aceh for something, and also Pakistan earthquake as well. I think
Mm.
are just two that maybe just blips on the military radar from our perspective, but the impact for our people and the people on the ground there was just tremendous.
Yeah, it was, and it was a bit of a bittersweet too, right? Because in terms of actually achieving and seeing tangible outcomes, you could see that in Banda Aceh. I mean, we were flying food, water, medical supplies. We were evacuating people. We were doing real time good to help people
Yeah.
in tragic circumstances. So that was a positive. Um, but the negative was being part of that devastation, and just seeing, so much tragedy was really quite impacting. And I don't think at the time we really understood and appreciated what people went through in that environment. And we're now seeing it
Mm.
show through in different ways, such as PTSD and the like, because it was purely devastating. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people killed.
One of the terms I always hear about PTSD is post-team separation disorder, and it's something that when you're there, with your mates at the time and you're doing the job, then, you just get through it and you crack on with it together. And, there's probably even dark humor around it. But it's the next life, or it's, when you're separated from that team and it's by yourself that, for some people that's where it really sort of kicks in, maybe years, maybe decades later. But mate, when did you get to the point that it was time for a change? And, after a significant part of your life. So you're still, so if you joined up at like 20, you're now sort of early 40s. Still got plenty to go, but it's time for a change.
Yeah, so after my time as commanding officer of the school, I was very fortunate to be the liaison officer to the US Marine Corps. So generally an infantry position. I was a
In the
pilot
States?
in the States,
Oh,
and
brilliant.
I was really lucky to be afforded that posting. So off I went for a 2-year posting. Initially, I was based out of Quantico, and then I spent most of my time in the Pentagon. Um, it was an absolutely brilliant experience. So for me at that time, my career was on the up and up. I was expecting to come back to Australia and be promoted. But what I say to people as well is the brakes were off. So I was an independent Australian in a foreign country with, my own budget and my own is left to my own devices to network, travel, integrate, and do my job. So, in terms of having that pressure that you have back in Australia for performing, that was off, and it was a time where I could reflect as well. And for me, I was flying from Washington DC to Los Angeles. It was a night flight, and just for some reason, everything just came down and hit me. It,
Yeah.
it, it was. It was just one of those moments. I was actually crying. I didn't know why. I was very embarrassed. It was a very full flight. People were looking at this fully grown man sitting there as a bit of a mess in the aircraft. And I just remember getting to LA and ringing my wife and saying, "Hey, this is happening. What's going on?" And
What's
that's
going
when
on here?
she said, "Look, you need help." And I was still very much in denial. I thought, "Hey, this is not happening. This is not me."
Stiff
Um,
upper lip, crack
Stiff
on.
upper lip. I wasn't special forces kicking down doors and doing all that sort of stuff. So, my brother, he was a combat engineer that was severely wounded in Afghanistan when his Bushmaster was blown up by an IED. So wait, it's not happening to me. But long story short, I came back to Australia and I just hid it, denied it, didn't take any treatment, and then basically had another breakdown. And I couldn't hide it at that stage.
Yeah.
So um, I went through that process, and it was a pretty long journey from there.
You
So
mentioned
I
something.
guess to answer your question, I didn't choose or decide it was time to have a break. It sort of was, the choice was made for me.
If I may ask, and I hope I'm not prying too much, but I think we always have an ability to compare ourselves to others, in the military. Like,
Mm.
well, we're not special forces and we didn't do this, or, even, and it's almost like we're on a spectrum. And no matter where you are on that spectrum, there's always someone ahead and behind you. But,
Yeah.
for me, I'm always very self deprecating, that I'm a loggy officer, and I almost feel like always a spectator in things. And I always need to, almost self-deprecate to push the war fighters or push the people that actually do far more harder and realistic stuff than me forward. But for those people, where does the line end? Because then you've got infantry that are doing things and they're looking forward. And then you've got potentially within special forces, you've got guys who are doing things, but they're obviously pushing forward. Whereas ultimately, now, and I will go back and say, my Afghanistan experience was 99% in the FOB, waking up in a bed, drinking cappuccinos like every day. So it was a definitive experience. But we always have this, like, sometimes we're not good enough, or we're not worthy to feel like that because someone else is doing it harder. Is that like your experience as well?
Yeah, that was absolutely my experience. And when I went through the transition, in terms of the medical support being removed from work and those sort of things, I fought it. I fought it all the way, and it wasn't until I ended up getting to rock bottom. I attempted to take my life on 2 occasions, and was hospitalised a number of times, that I realised everyone is different. And even though we all have different roles and different experiences, we have different makeups and things affect us differently. And, what I found as well is, as a pilot, I did see a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily about what you physically did as well, it was what you were exposed to. Um, and I started to realize that, yes, this what I experienced and who I am, it was having an effect. And it took a long, I won't deny it, it took a long time for me to accept. And so one of the reasons why I'm happy to talk about my experience today is because I went through this big denial.
Mm.
I want to hide this because I want to be promoted, or I don't want to be seen to be weak, or I don't want to lose my military career, and all of those sorts of things. But I want to give people the confidence that are feeling the same way to actually come out and not be ashamed.
Yeah.
And it saved
And
my
it's like,
life. It saved my life. It saved my family and me. So,
and there, we're going to have this natural tendency to always compare or again to self-deprecate our own situations, but ultimately it's just you and yourself and your family that matters. So uh if I may ask just a little bit more, just in terms of
yeah.
from anyone else out there that is going through it, where did you get help and what were your tools to get yourself from that point to this point?
Yeah, and so this is the really hard part. I was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and I got no help. I was put on leave in a married quarter on a street with all the brigadiers and senior ranking officers. Um, I was pretty much not contacted. I went into hospital as a lieutenant colonel. I was discharged in hospital. No one came to my bedside. No one thanked me for my service, and I walked out as a mister.
Yeah.
Um, so, long story short, is I didn't get any, and in the end, it was up to me. And what I did when I was in hospital the second time, I actually, and this is when I accepted it and thought, I need to be able to deal with this. One of the things that I did was I set myself a goal. So I've always wanted to do a triathlon. The Noosa Triathlon was on my bucket list.
Yep.
I contacted them, couldn't get in. It books out a year in advance. Found out that Beyond Blue has a mental health charity part of Noosa. I rang them. They were full, but they let me have a spot because of my
Yep.
situation. I got my bike trainer delivered to the hospital, and I rode that thing every day. I ran around the ring road. I was lifting rocks for exercise. I just set myself a goal that I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to do this triathlon because I can and I need to. Um, One, because the physical aspect helps with the mental health as well. And so, when I got out of hospital, I then joined a civilian triathlon team. So that gave me some connection
Mm.
with other people. And then I went through and I achieved, I actually competed in the triathlon and did it. So that was just me picking myself up and going forward. Um, I've had lots of ups and downs along the way. Um, and I've just had to try and work out, how I can get through this. So I guess in answer to your question, it's getting a lot better in terms of the support, but at the end of the day, it's still mostly left to the individual to decide what path they're
Yeah.
going to take. And so as a person that's been through it, and anyone listening to this podcast or anyone out there, I'm available to you know talk and listen and share experiences because I want to help. I went through it and it's
It makes
tough.
me worried a little bit that if half colonels don't get help when they understand the system or just what's out there for the diggers, ultimately. Yeah, look, how
And you're right. So when I was in hospital, there were a bunch of diggers in there, and initially I went in, and it's shock and awe, and you stay in your room, and it's quite isolating. But then I saw these soldiers and they were struggling. And so, I started, I ran a movie night, and got all the soldiers to come in, and we just, watched a movie, and slowly people started talking, and things like that. And then, someone saw me running circles around the hospital and they said, can I join you?
Yeah.
I said, yes,
Yeah. Please.
um, please. And so, here I was dealing with my own issues, but actually what helped me was helping others. And, had I've not done that, they would have all just sat in their rooms, isolated. It's quite disappointing what happens.
I got to ask, was 300 on your movie list?
300 on the movie list.
Classic. Like, surely every army jerk and has watched 300 at least 25
yeah,
times.
yeah.
Mate, one thing that's resonating in my ears is ultimately, self-help is the best help. And having said that, don't be afraid to reach out. I've got this theory, right, that why people abandon you post-military. And I use that term abandon lightly and flippantly, but we are taught to make new friends really easily, right? So you go to RMC, you have your classmates and you have your, Captain on Kokoda and all that kind of stuff. But then you move into your first course and you do your ROBC, LOBC. Then you go to your first unit, then you go to grade 3. You're constantly going to new units, new courses. And it's just like new friends. Here's some new friends.
Yeah.
But when you go to those new courses, when you're serving, it's not like you forget your old mates. You just bump into them somewhere else down the track and in just the natural evolution of posting cycles, course cycles, deployments, whatever. And it's not like we need to call those old mates because we've just got new friends and they just get given to us. But when you separate, that moment breaks. And it's not like your old friends have forgotten about you. We're just trained to keep moving forward with our social life because we just keep getting filled with new mates. But when you separate, that stops. And that's when there's no sort of, what am I doing back again? And sometimes you sort of think, I haven't heard from anyone for a long time or whatever. But it's just not in their mindset. It's not their fault because they're just rolling forward as Army does, just rolls like a snowball down the hill. So that's my little theory on why that separation sort of happens. And when you get out, it can be so very distinct and very eye-opening that, hey, I'm just by myself again, particularly if you spent so long and you don't have those childhood mates or outside mates.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm passionate about, and I really want to unpack now, is the military story is a great big definer and it's a big contributor to who we are, but it doesn't have to be the be all and end all of who we are. Now, one of the greatest things that we can do for those in our community and those people who have transitioned or about to transition is do this kind of like lighthouse thing, like you see it, you can be it. Mate, I want to unpack your book, C3P3 Leadership, because my thoughts, I did a chat with some business leaders about 2 weeks ago, and it was about leadership, a little bit of a round circle yarn. And I was sort of listening for a while, and then one goes like, "Hey, weren't you in the army? What's your opinion on this?" And the thing that I could really nail it down to was character. As one of my core principles. This is before I read your book, but I found it actually hard to articulate leadership outside of those fundamental character traits. Now, your model, the C3, do you just want to, I've got it here. I'm just going to open it up. I haven't memorized it. My apologies. I have read your book. Character, courage, conviction, and then persist, pivot, and part with. I found it a very simple and pragmatic tool to basically take all these things that I'd learned from the military and start applying them into my own business and my own behaviors. How did you come up with the methodology, first of all?
Yeah. So I'll take you back to, because a lot of people have been asking me, why aren't you flying for the airlines? Why are you trying to do this leadership pathway?
Yep.
And it goes back to an experience I had as an officer commanding when one of my pilots was tragically killed. You'd remember Marcus case.
Yep.
Um, so at that time, I had a whole bunch of young pilots, and he was a beloved guy. He was a great guy, good hands and feet pilot. Everyone loved Marcus. So the squadron took it really hard, as you'd expect. And you know, as the OC, I had to let these men and women grieve, but I had to rebuild them and I had to keep them on mission. Operations don't stop.
Were
It
you
was
over there at the time? If I asked, or
no,
were you back here?
back in Australia at the
Mm.
time, and we. So it was very very difficult, and I took the squadron down to Melbourne. We attended Marcus's funeral. And then I had to get the guys back up for Talisman Sabre, and I had a lot of pressure from the top saying, "You've got to get there. You're already late. The exercise started. Go 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 go." And then I had pressure from below. People were struggling. I had peers saying, "You're going to cause another death because you're pushing these guys too hard." It was coming from every direction. And one night after orders, everyone left, and one of the pilots came up to me and he said, "Hey, sir, you've done everything you can for us. You've got our back. You're looking after us. You're doing everything, but who's looking after you?"
Mm.
And at that point, it just hit me like a lightning bolt. No one, no one's looking after me. No one's got my back. Um, you know, and so where I'm going with this is I know right now there are CEOs, C-suite executives, HR leaders, small business owners. There are people all around the country right now that are in the same position that I am in. They're alone, without peer support or someone to turn to, and they need to make critical, timely decisions that could have positive or adverse effects on their business or their organization or their career. And so I thought, how do you help someone in that situation? And there's lots of leadership frameworks out there, but this is more of a decision making framework that I wanted to be really simple that I used throughout the military career. And that was basically, I'm here, I've got to make a decision. How am I going to do this? Well, the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at my character. What are my values? What are my beliefs? How do they align with the situation at hand? And then I need to potentially build some courage from within, because often the right decision is often hard. Making these guys get out there and fly whilst they're grieving, it's a tough thing to do. And also the conviction. You've got to stay true to your purpose, your mission, and your values. You've got to see things through to its logical conclusion. So the three C's are more of your inner reflections and how you're going to start formulating your decision making process. The three P's are, I believe, there's three options. You're either going to persist with what you're doing, build some resilience, reinforce, and continue, or you're going to adapt and pivot what you're doing. Or potentially, as you alluded to when we were talking before the podcast, is sometimes you've just got to let things go. Maybe it's your ego's in the way because it was your idea and it's not working. Or the typical one for the corporate world is sunken cost.
Yeah.
And again, that takes courage to go, geez, I've put a lot of time and money in this. It's not working. I need to let it go. And so I
It is a
guess
real
my
challenge. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, mate.
so I,
After you.
so I guess what I'm trying to do is give people a simple framework that they can use in everyday life. It doesn't matter whether you're in the corporate world, you're in government, you're in the military, or even just a student at school. You can apply C3P3 to any situation, really.
Well, I read this book. You don't have to picture it, but I love reading in the bath, nice deep bathtub. And I was sitting there, and as I was getting through, I, I got the character, courage, conviction thing that was really, infused, or love to throw the word in, inculcated as part of your, you gotta love throwing that word in whenever you can, as part of
Yeah,
your military training.
it behoves you.
Yeah, but the persist, pivot, and part with. Like I've been trying to work with this. So it's a RSL sub branch that's in the heart of Sydney, and I've been trying to contribute in an environment that is really sort of negative towards me in terms of the people. I don't feel like I'm well liked there, but I've
Mhm.
been persisting for ages to the point where it's now just getting toxic, and I'm just sort of
Mm.
like, why am I doing this? Why am I actually investing my time and contributing or attempting to contribute where and it's my ego.
Mm.
So I had that moment in the bath where I was just like, mate, just resign from the committee, mate. There's no point, and focus on all of there's so many other things I could be investing my time in, but it's the one small but a critical point for me is how do you know when to persist, and how do you know when to pivot, and how do you know when to part? It's a really because isn't it the antithesis sometimes of each other?
Mm.
But
Mm.
coming back to some of your earlier points, the decisiveness and the courage and the conviction of being able to make the right decision at the right time with the information that you've got.
Yeah, and one of the ones that I'm using in the corporate environment at the moment is job role fit. So
Mm.
you'll have these people that are in these roles and they're not happy, they're not, or they may be underperforming, or it's not, it's not that they're no good, it's just they're in the wrong role at the wrong time. And they might just have to part with that role or the organization. um, for instance, you might be working in the not-for-profit sector and you're finding yourself continually frustrated with working with volunteers and trying to raise money, etc., whereas you're more suited to working in the corporate private sector. Um, so, you can stay in that not-for-profit sector in that role and you can be unhappy and miserable in your job
Yeah.
or underperform, or you can get some courage, look at your character and those values and say to yourself, you know what, it's just not right for me. It's nothing
Yeah.
personal. And it's hard. It's hard for people to go, oh, this job isn't right for me, I'm going to leave. Look at all of us in the military. Um, it's very, very hard for a lot of people to leave,
Yeah. Oh,
even though they've got to a point in their military career where it's just not right for them anymore. They stay.
yeah. Yeah. Whether it be the golden handcuffs or, you know,
Mm.
the fear of just what else is out there. It is a very like nested community. But sharing my leadership experiences, I found leadership in the army easy, to be honest, because you were equipped with the tools, you had the framework and the structure of command, lead, manage, and you've got great soldiers who are just an absolute joy to work with.
Yep.
When I came into the business world, though, when those frameworks were like taken away, I don't necessarily think I was a good business leader. I think far too soft. Far well, when I say far too soft, is one of the problems that we had is we built our business from like the ground up, and
Mhm.
because we started with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We almost didn't get rid of anybody ever, and
Mm.
it was a real eye opener for me when I got the new CEO come into one of our companies, offshore talent, last year, that opening up with a fresh perspective of the people that were sitting in roles that just weren't performing. And
Yep.
they'd been there from the start, and a lot of them we had personal relationships with, but how I was constraining the business with my lack of courage and not being able to see, the forest for the trees kind of thing. So
Mm.
it was an interesting eye opener for me because we sort of feel like military sometimes like, yeah, we own this leadership space and we got it. But
Mm.
reading your book really helped me understand and bring some of these sort of structures back to be able to apply to my business space. So,
Yes. Yes, that's
eh,
really important. I felt the same way. When and you alluded to some of the things there, your environment outside of the military is very different.
yeah,
You know, one of the buzzwords at the moment in the business landscape is psychosocial safety. Okay, that's very different in the military. What I find in a lot of my interactions with the corporate world is everyone's aspiring to be a leader. Well, what about the good followers? And that seems
Yeah.
to be a bit of a dirty word. So I've changed the term followership to high impact performer,
Absolutely.
which goes down a bit better as well. But one of the things, and I'm starting to look at writing a second book to actually bridge this gap. I've got this triangle of influence. So, you know, everyone's got a capability, skills, knowledge, qualifications, experience, those sort of things. Everyone also has a particular energy for impact. You know,
Mm.
are you a strategist, or are you a game changer ideas person, or do you like to implement and do things? Are you a polisher in terms of you like to make things better, high standards, or are you a playmaker? You energize in bringing people together. And so then the third piece of the triangle is your character. And what underpins your character is your personality traits and your behaviors. So, how are you when you're at your best? What's your leadership style like? What are the things that are constructive but can be destructive when you're under pressure or stress or bored? So, what are those things that can derail you? And then what are your motivators, values, and drivers? And what I do is I look at the three aspects of the triangle. And we've touched on this a little bit about fit. Are you in the right role at the right time? Do you fit within that organization? And the analogy is, you know, you can take an excellent soccer player or football player, sportsman from any team. You know, they're at the top of their game and they are doing really well. They then go to another team and all of a sudden they're not performing as well. Now, it's not that sportsman's terrible or no good. They're just in the wrong team
Yeah.
for that time, the wrong culture,
And,
the wrong
and vice
organization,
versa. You
and
get the
vice
other
versa.
guy who's struggling in that fit. They
Yeah,
get traded somewhere else and they're like, where did this guy come from? He's been sitting on the bench, for the last 3 years and now he's out there scoring 20 points a game.
exactly. Or we've all seen the person that's been promoted one rank or job level too high. You know, they're brilliant at one level and then they've been moved up and they're struggling. So what I look at now is those three parts of the triangle to determine where people are best, where they best fit, how their energies can be used for impacting teams and organizations, and having a good understanding of how their personality traits can either enhance their leadership or derail it. And
Yeah.
I put that into context with their capabilities and skills. And so that's what I'm really passionate about at the moment, because we sort of found our own leadership pathway. I mean, we had leadership training through the military, but you know, it's about understanding those areas of yourself early on in your leadership journey to be able to put yourself in the right position at the right time.
Couple of really interesting points there. I love the bit about high impact performers versus followers, because in my
Mm.
personal experience now, okay, so in the military, there is really only one socially accepted pathway, and that is command, 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 command. Where is your
Mhm.
next milestone? Where is your next command? But that's the only, well, initially the only socially acceptable path. If you tap out, corporal, sergeant, major, you don't make your gateways, there is a little bit of, like, oh, well, only the cream rises to the top or whatever. I
Yeah.
felt for me that I was really happy being a captain. Number one, because I joined at 30, so I didn't join at 20. And I
Mhm.
was starting to have kids and that kind of thing. And I was like, now, thrusters, you can come through. I'm really happy just here in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, hopefully at keeping my married quarter in Coogee. But but then when I went and started our first business, I I had to be the CEO, because
Yeah.
I'm a military guy. I got to be the boss, but I was a
Mm.
shit CEO, to be honest. Um, And I think one of the biggest lessons for me with military versus business is ego versus experience. So in the first business, Secure Windows, I wasn't a good leader or manager, and there wasn't command there because that structure doesn't exist anymore. And we left millions on the table just from squandered opportunity. The second business, when I was leading that one, that this is our offshore talent, my key constraint was experience, right? That we'd taken the business to maybe it was like $4 or $5 million a year in revenue, roughly. But the challenge was I hadn't been experienced at the level to take things to a $5 million, a $10 million business. So
Yeah.
how did I actually, and my military mindset, I was trying to solve problems. And I knew I had the tools to ideate different solutions, but none of them were world-class. And none of them were based on experience, been there, done that. We get this new CEO in, and in the initial handover period, I'm like, oh, I've got this problem, that problem, trying to get this solution. And he's just like, oh man, I've been there and done that. That's a speed bump, not a problem. And we'll just solve it like this. And it was a massive reality check for me that experience over ego. And I'm now quite happily not even in that business. The business has evolved so fast under the 12 months of his leadership that if he chooses to leave, and if you're listening to this, Sean, don't, please. But if he does choose to leave, then the business has already evolved beyond me. And I don't think I could go back and be the leader. I'd have to recruit and refine someone else. So I guess that's for me in terms of this leadership. The big one is understanding ego and where your strengths are.
And it comes back to the courage aspect as well. So, you've done the internal reflection. You've looked at your character and your experience and your capabilities, all of those things. But then you've got the courage to be able to say, hey, that's not me, or there's a capability or an experience gap here. I need to bring someone else in. And that's hard for a lot of people because they do want to be the person that runs the shop. And it's nothing to say that you are not a good leader at all. That's untrue. It's just at that point in time in that business setup, the right person is Sean. And you've brought him in and you've kicked some massive goals. So in fact, you've displayed good leadership in terms of, through courage and conviction and character, appointing a CEO other than yourself.
And what's beautiful now is the business is running better. It's more profitable. I'll end up making more money. The asset's worth more. And I get to concentrate. And because of making that decision, I now do VBC full time. This is now my passion. And I don't need to be, and I don't want to be, leading or managing complex teams of hundreds of people. I just love being in my space now, which is talking all things about veteran enterprise and entrepreneurship and connecting with the community again. If I can, I know we've got to wrap pretty shortly, but writing a book, what was your pathway? How did you, I'm a butterfly chasing scatterbrain. How did you get the commitment or the dedication to put these ideas and literally become an author?
Yeah. So the book started with me, part of my healing journey, capturing memories. One quick memory was physics class, year 11, learning Bernoulli's theorem. And I said to the teacher, what does this have to do with getting a job? And I got kicked out and saw the principal, only to go to pilot's course day one and get told, hey, has anyone heard of Bernoulli's theorem? Yeah, I have, but I don't know what it is. Well, it's how a wing stays in the air. Didn't I feel like a muppet? So I just was taking all these good, bad memories and putting them in paper. And my wife, Shelley, was reading these and she said, these are really good. These could be used as icebreakers for team workshops, or they could be used to show leadership skills and the like. And so from there, I took a few of these memories. So you would have known because you've read the book. It's not just a leadership book. It's here's a military or an experience that I had, and here's how it translates
application.
into the application. So that's how it came about. And I wrote it. I'd never written a book before. For all those people out there thinking of writing a book, it costs a lot of money.
Mm.
It's not cheap. I self-published as well, and yeah, and it's out there. And look, I'm selling copies, but I didn't do this to sell. This is I give away most of my books because I want people to be able to, learn from what I've experienced and then apply that to everyday life. So.
Well, mate, I enjoyed the read, and I definitely, even with my, I had a great military career, 10 years, and I've been in business now for, roughly coming up to 10 years, but it was definitely some really bite-sized, low-hanging fruit, probably of reflection and then to application. It's not necessarily, I don't think I learned new things, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's that common sense is uncommon, or forest for the trees, or just like, oh my gosh, how am I missing this thing in terms of just being able to grab onto it and reflect. And then after my reflection, being able to put that into application. So that was the best part for me about it. And again, the most decisive point was part with. We're
Yeah.
good at persisting. We're even good at pivoting because pivoting is part of persistence in terms of, right, test and adjust, crack on, let's go left instead of right. But the
Yep.
part with one was particularly poignant for me in terms of what's value adding and what's holding me back, on this journey that we're on. Mate, tell me about Middleton Consulting Group. What do you
Yep.
do, and who should be reaching out to you?
Yeah, so leadership and business performance. So I am going out there to CEOs, executives, HR, even emerging leaders. Next week, I'm briefing a whole bunch of 20 to 30-year-old emerging leaders. Um, and what I do is I use the GC index, which is a organometric tool to work out where your energies for impact are. So I touched on those in terms of whether you're a strategist or an implementer. I also use Hogan's leadership series psychometrics to determine how others perceive you and what your derailing behaviors are. And then I put those together with your capabilities and experience and basically present a plan, a leadership plan for individuals to go back and reflect and say, okay, so where are my gaps? Where can I work on my leadership? Am I in the right role, the right place? Where do I want to go? And those sort of things. So that's really what I'm working on at the moment. I then take that into organisational redesign. I'm assisting a not-for-profit organisation as we speak. And I'm also doing recruiting. So I'm helping organisations select the right person for that role rather than the wrong person.
So from a product perspective, you can either get into a keynote, you can get and talk about leadership and display some of your experience, but there's also deeper, more engaged programs where you can spend a couple of weeks, a couple of months getting into the fabric of leadership and the fabric of the structure of the business.
Yes, and culture is another big one that I'm working on at the moment as well. So I'm looking at helping organisations understand individuals and how they play together or not to affect the company or the team's culture. I do that through workshops as well.
Mate, I'm going to wrap it there. I want to say, number one, thank you for catching up. It's been a few years since we've been able to have a yarn, and this is one of the real pleasures that I have, working with the veteran business community, is just, meeting old friends and creating new ones. But thank you again for your vulnerability and honesty about, challenges that you've had, and particularly around that transition, and the fact that, we're all just people. We're all just doing this pathway, and there's no point comparing yourself to anybody else. You're your own man or woman on your own journey. So I really appreciate that. But and thanks for writing the book, because I've been able to get a lot out of it, personally and professionally. When roughly should we be on the lookout for the next one?
Well, the next one's probably going to be early next year.
Okay, brilliant. Now, your website is middletonconsultinggroup.com. You're based up in Brizzy, but I'm sure that, you can connect with people anywhere. We will put all of your contact details, website, and all of that in the show notes, mate. And I really appreciate you coming along and saying good day today.
Thanks, Pete. It's been a real pleasure. Through you, just reconnecting has been amazing. And as you know, you reconnected me through Edward Plant, another
Yeah.
childhood military friend as well. And I've just got to say, the VBCC is a great initiative, and well done for standing that up.
Oh, no, thank you. So, well, the biggest thing that we want to put out there about the VBC is the C, which is community, is absolutely deliberate and intentional. The first at the lowest level, we just want to have a network of people with shared experiences who love business. We are very, very deliberately positioning ourselves as quality providers to the corporate world. We'll all come into this community with our different experiences, different baggage. We don't care whether you're regular, reserve, Army, Navy, Air Force, private, general, Choco, full-time, it doesn't matter. If you've served in uniform and you're interested or passionate about business, we're here as a community to support you on your journey. So, mate, thanks very much. Have a great day. My name is Pete Liston, and this is the Military Mindset for Business Pod. Out.